There is a reason that the life and vibrancy, the energy, the excitement is with conservatives this year. Our country's in crisis. We know it all across this country. You know, yesterday I had a rally in Charleston, South Carolina. Had a woman come up to me at the rally. She said, in 2008, I voted for Barack Obama. She said, in 2012, I didn't vote for anyone. I was so upset I just stayed home. And she said, in 2016, I'm with you. What I want to talk to you all about today is this is our time. I want to talk to you as leaders of the conservative movement. RedState is an incredible gathering. This is the 7th RedState. This is the 7th time I've been at RedState. I remember the first RedState at an Atlanta hotel with a gathering that wasn't much bigger than about this right here. The men and women who are here, y'all are leaders. You're bloggers, you're journalists, you're activists, you're informed thought leaders. Every person sitting here touches hundreds, touches thousands, touches tens of thousands. Listen, I know it firsthand. I wouldn't be in the United States Senate if it were not for the men and women in this room, if it were not for the leaders at RedState. There's a reason when I launched my campaign for Senate, we did it on a conference call with bloggers. Because we understand the power of serious conservative thought leaders. And you know, for a long time, the conservative movement, we've been lamenting for decades, how come nobody will stand up? How come we elect one leader after another, they talk a good game, and then when it comes to the fight, when the shooting starts, they end up cowering under their desk. This is something that we've said over and over and over again. We've got to distinguish between campaign conservatives who on the campaign trail suddenly discovered they're the most conservative soul to have ever lived. It is amazing what happens on the campaign trail. Have you ever noticed, okay, last night on Cleveland, I'm pretty sure not a single person in the debate stood up and said, I'm an establishment moderate squish. I stand for nothing. Have you noticed that they run as us? That's how they run. By the way, they say if you're actually us, you're unelectable. But yet when they're running, they understand their message doesn't sell. The men and women in this room can play a critical role leading the conservative movement in assessing the records of every candidate running. I'm going to suggest to you a simple test. Each of you, I would encourage you, make a list of the 10 or 12 most important issues, the biggest fights of the last several years. And you decide, based on the issues that matter to you, whether it's fiscal conservative issues or social conservative issues or national security issues, constitutional issues, you make the list. And ask of every candidate running whether he or she has stood up and led on those issues in any meaningful way. This is a room of educated, serious political observers and activists and leaders. Ask of any candidate, here's my list. When have you stood up and fought to stop Obamacare? Not talked about it, but stood in the foxholes when incoming was coming at you. When have you stood and fought against President Obama's illegal and unconstitutional executive amnesty? When have you stood and fought against the debt that's bankrupting our kids and grandkids? When have you stood and fought to defend the First Amendment? Free speech, and especially religious liberty. And I got to tell you, Indiana was a time for choosing. There were so many Republican leaders who ran for the hills. On the Second Amendment, where were you when Harry Reid and Barack Obama tried to come after our right to keep and bear arms? On the Fourth Amendment, what have you done to stop the federal government from seizing the cell phone communications and emails of law-abiding citizens? On the 10th Amendment, where are you on Common Core? And have you always opposed it, or did you just magically oppose it the day you announced for president? On marriage, are you willing to stand and lead? Or when the Supreme Court justices violated their oaths and issued a lawless decision, did you come out with some mealy-mouthed statement about law of the land, accept it, surrender, move on? On life, when have you stood and fought on life, on Planned Parenthood? How are you leading? And are you looking for a meaningless show vote? Or do you actually want leadership to stop the atrocity that is what appears to be an ongoing criminal organization of Planned Parenthood? On Israel, what have you done? Standing and leading the fight to stand with Israel on ISIS and radical Islamic terrorism in Iran. When have you stood and fought to lead? That's the test. Those are my dozen. But I'd encourage each of you, find your own dozen that you think are the biggest fights in the day and ask of every candidate, what's their record? What have they actually done leading on those issues? That's what the men and women in this room can do more effectively than anyone else, is dive down beyond the talking points to the actual records. Now, why does it matter so much? You know, it matters because over and over again, we keep winning. And then we lose. We win elections, and then the people we elect don't do what they say. We were told if only you can get the House of Representatives, things will be different. So in 2010, millions of Americans, led by the men and women in this room, rose up. We won the House. And virtually nothing changed. Then we were told, okay, the problem's the Senate. You guys don't understand. It's just a half of a third of the government. You can't do it with just the House. So we said, fine. Harry Reid's the problem. In 2014, millions of Americans rose up. In an historic election, we won the Senate. We retired Harry Reid as majority leader. And what exactly has this new Republican majority accomplished? It's actually even worse than that. All right, I got to say, though, in hearing nothing, I'm reminded of one of those great scenes from The Untouchables, where Robert De Niro as Capone says, man stands at the bait with a bat in his hand, alone, but without his team. What is he? Nothing! It's worse than that. In this case, our team's playing for the other side. November 2014, we won historic majorities in both houses. What happened since then? The first thing that happened is the Republicans came back, joined with Harry Reid, and passed a $1 trillion Cromnibus plan filled with corporate welfare and pork. Then the Republican majority voted to fund Obamacare. to fund President Obama's executive amnesty, to fund Planned Parenthood, and then Republican leadership led the fight to confirm Loretta Lynch as Attorney General of the United States. Here's one simple question. Which of those decisions is one iota different than it would have been with Harry Reid and the Democrats in the Senate?
Zero, none.
This is why we're frustrated. And this is why the men and women in this room have such an important role to ask of every candidate running. Don't just tell me how you stood up to Democrats, particularly in a context that didn't really matter much. Show me when you stood up to your own party. Show me where you've stood up to Republican leadership and the Washington cartel and stood with the people. Now, a lot of folks in the media want to convince us nothing can be done. It's too complicated. It's too big. You can't change the country. They want to tell us that everyone here give up, go home, abandon hope, all ye who educate. Let me take a minute to expand on my closing statement in Cleveland. Let me tell you what I intend to do on my first day in office if I'm elected president. On January 20th, 2017, the first thing I intend to do is rescind every single illegal and unconstitutional executive action taken by Barack Obama.
So I got a ton of questions for the senator. Y'all won't mind taking a few minutes of your lunch break to ask him.
Oddly enough, Eric, that was not the experience 2 nights ago.
Well, we'll make up for it now. So, John from Leonardstown, Maryland. Our position as a world leader has eroded. Doors are being opened to our enemies. What will you do in terms of foreign policy to correct this? And do you have any thoughts on Cuba?
Yes. We need a strong commander-in-chief.
Amen. Woo!
The 2 things that change the fastest with a new president are executive action and foreign policy. It's worth remembering that in 1981, Iran released our hostages the day Ronald Reagan was sworn into office.
Yes. Right on. Woo!
There's a reason when I talked about what I intended to do the first day, that 2 of them were very directly focused on foreign policy. Moving the embassy to Jerusalem is a statement to the world. We will stand by our friends and allies, no matter the criticism from the intelligentsia at the United Nations. And ripping up the Iran deal is a powerful statement because, look, this election, in many ways, the most important issue in this election, both in the primary and the general, is the threat of a nuclear Iran. It's the one threat that could murder millions of Americans. And I got to tell you, I cannot wait to stand on the debate stage with Hillary Clinton. And to make clear, if you vote for Hillary, you are voting for Iran to have nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
And if I'm elected president, under no circumstances will a nation led by a theocratic zealot who leads chants of death to America be allowed to acquire the weapons that could murder millions of Americans. When it comes to radical Islamic terrorism, I think we need to rediscover Ronald Reagan's strategy for the Cold War. We win, they lose.
Yes!
We have variations of the next question from several people, including this one from Taryn in Madison, Wisconsin. The government shuts down every weekend. Why are Republican leaders so afraid of the fight over Planned Parenthood?
Yes!
Because they're not on our side.
Yeah. Right.
Amen.
And let me actually take a minute to explain something, because sometimes folks complain, how come our leadership isn't very good, they're unwilling to fight, they're not competent? None of that's true. Leadership is actually quite effective and quite willing to fight. They're just not fighting for us. So, for example, when it comes to cronyism and corporate welfare, when it comes to the Export-Import Bank, leaders in both houses will fight ferociously with a knife between their teeth, crawling over broken glass. Why? Because what they're doing is they're listening and they're part of the Washington cartel. The giant corporations getting taxpayer-guaranteed loans come with wheelbarrows full of campaign checks. And so a couple of weeks ago, when I shared some thoughts about Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, I was told the same thing that I was told when I shared thoughts about Iran. That rhetoric, you can't say that, and the truth is not rhetoric. Standing up and speaking the truth. Here's the truth. Mitch McConnell and Harry Reid are arm in arm working together to reauthorize the Export-Import Bank and to continue the cronyism and corporate welfare of Washington. It's not two parties, it's one party, the party of Washington, the McConnell-Reid leadership team.
Yeah.
So when it comes to something like a shutdown, let's take the issue of Planned Parenthood. So in the midst of the highway bill, I stood with Mike Lee and we fought to have an amendment at a 50-vote threshold where it could matter to actually defund Planned Parenthood. We weren't blocked by the Democrats from doing that. We were blocked by Republican leadership.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, there are 54 Republican senators, and yet when we were standing there, Mike Lee and I were standing alone, fighting to actually defund Planned Parenthood. Now, instead, leadership likes to have show votes. So we schedule a vote with a 60-vote threshold that we know we'll lose. All the Republicans vote yes, all the Democrats vote no. We pat ourselves on the back. And their view is they're not actually trying to fight for the issues we care about. They're not fighting to defund Planned Parenthood. They're not fighting to stop Obamacare. They certainly aren't fighting to stop executive amnesty or illegal immigration or pass Kate's Law or end sanctuary cities. Because the Washington cartel supports bigger government and supports illegal immigration. And so their standard response anytime you say, let us use the constitutional powers of Congress to change what's happening. The Democrats say, well, if you do anything like that, we will hold the government hostage and shut down the government, and the Republican leadership says, oh, never mind, we'll just cut a deal to grow government instead.
Sure.
The problem is they're not listening to us. We need to change that. And the way you change it is the grassroots holding all of us accountable.
So before I ask the next question, it will be the last question, I just noticed the crowd. It's a good thing the fire marshal's a Ted Cruz supporter. So I've got this question from California, Florida, Georgia, and New Jersey, and it's all the same question. This one, you can probably give a good concise one on this. In your time in Washington, have you yet figured out what it means to lead from behind?
Well, sure, Republican congressional leadership does it every day. On foreign policy, leading from behind means withdrawing from the world, abandoning our friends and allies. Imagine, for example, all right, 7 years ago, the first RedState, in that little Atlanta ballroom. Imagine I would have suggested that we were going to see a Democratic president who Prime Minister Netanyahu would come to America to address a joint session of Congress, and the president, the vice president, and every member of the cabinet would boycott the elected Prime Minister of Israel, and the president would refuse to see him at the White House. Every one of you would have said, frankly, what's being said about me, now that rhetoric's crazy. That'll never happen. That's black helicopter loony stuff. You know what? That's leading from behind. Have you noticed that every bad actor, every enemy of America is stronger after 6.5 years of the Obama-Clinton foreign policy?
Yes.
Putin is stronger. China is strong. China just did a massive hack into our federal government records. Russia just did a massive hack into the Pentagon the day after General Soleimani, the head of the Al-Quds forces from Iran, returned in open violation of the sanctions. ISIS, who you recall not long ago the president told us was the junior varsity, is crucifying Christians and beheading children. Iran is on the verge of acquiring a nuclear weapon. You know, Prime Minister Netanyahu was right. He said the one person telling the truth about this Iranian nuclear deal is Rouhani. Rouhani's saying we got everything we wanted.
Right.
You know, I saw an editorial cartoon recently that sums it up perfectly. It has Khamenei, the Ayatollah, saying, "Death to every American." And it has John Kerry saying, "Can we meet you halfway?" That's leading from behind.
Failing me today. So, okay, I get to ask the first question. Oh, here's the stack. So, let me put you on the spot a little bit on this question. What sets you apart as a governor who last held office in 2007 from the current governors who are running for office?
Well, I think it's the comprehensive nature of my reforms. And if you don't mind, I'll toot my horn here a little bit. Everything that I said in terms of cutting taxes, eliminating affirmative action. Has anybody done that? No. Replacing it with a model that actually allowed for more African Americans and Hispanics to attend our universities, and big procurement gains, eliminating set-asides and the things that were discriminatory, and replacing it with a leadership model actually works a lot better. We eliminated career civil service protections. You can fire people at will if they're incompetent. You could pay people more if they were doing a good job. We reduced the state government workforce by 13,000. We created the first statewide voucher program in the country. We created the second statewide voucher program in the country. We created the largest virtual school in the country by far. We created, I think, the third largest voucher program in the country. We reformed our education system, had the greatest learning gains. We led the nation in job growth 7 out of my 8 years. We had more small businesses created during my 8 years than any state. We were one of 2 states to go to AAA bond rating. When I left, there were $9 billion of reserves compared to $1 billion when we started. I vetoed 2,500 separate line items in the budget. They called me Vito Corleone because of that. I'm not saying other people's records are bad. I'm just saying if people look at this, I think they would say this is the most comprehensive record of consistent conservative principles applied in a state, a purple state, that helped people rise up. People were a lot better off in my 8th year than they were on the day that I started. And I think that's the way to win. And by the way, I won in a purple state with 500,000 more registered Democrats than Republicans. I got 60% of the Hispanic vote. I won re-election in this turbulent time. There's a lot of tire marks on my forehead, Eric, doing this. Makes it sound like it's simple to do this. Everybody fought this. The teachers union mortgaged their building and then financed my opponent's operation when I ran for re-election. The trial bar hated me. The bureaucrats hated me. People didn't like me at all. This was not a happy time. Thank you. So it's a record of accomplishment that I think is pretty significant. And I won. I didn't talk about it, which is really good to talk about things, to heighten awareness of these things. I got to say what I was going to do, and then I did it.
I'm happy to loan you some of the tire marks from Donald Trump's campaign today. Pat from Sharpsburg, Georgia. Governor Bush, how can we prevent the implementation of the recent rules from the Obama administration regarding their new affordable housing regulations?
Well, if any of these rules are in process, they can be stopped by the next president. And that's what in my comments I made reference to this. If it's an executive order that's beginning the process of official rulemaking, until that is complete, all of those can be reversed. And that would be the first order of business for my presidency, and hopefully for any Republican's presidency. And that's how you would do it. If it's done, if the rule goes through the administrative process and is complete, then you have to start the administrative process over. Here's what I won't do. And there's a temptation now to do this. I'm not speaking about anybody in particular, but I think there's a temptation to say, well, Obama did it, so we can do it. Obama tramples over the Constitution with executive orders that he doesn't have the legal authority to make, so we should do it. I'm not going to do that. The Constitution is a document that we should respect.
I've got a number of these questions, and I think probably the best phrased one is Ed from Sacramento. Wants to know, Governor Bush, we're
apprehensive. On the way, Ed. I know you're behind enemy lines in Sacramento.
We're apprehensive based on what we've either heard you say or heard other people say about your positions on illegal immigration in the country. What can you do to make us feel comfortable?
Well, first of all, read my book that was published 4 years ago. I'm saying the same things now. Immigration Wars, you can get it on Amazon for like 99 cents, I'm afraid. It's not a bestseller. It's not like one of Eric's books. So, his is the bestseller, mine's not. So, this last week we unveiled kind of elements of the book, a comprehensive plan on how to deal with this. And if you talk to border governors, they'll tell you it's inappropriate to have Border Patrol officers, the majority of which 40 miles off the border. Makes no sense. You forward lean. You create camps, in essence. You create bases. You create a strategy, and where the where the movement of people across the border becomes surges towards, in some place that doesn't exist now, you move there. And you use technology. And you use fencing wherever appropriate. Most of the time that's in urban areas. You create a comprehensive strategy, you measure it, you go at it. This is what people in business do. This is what governors do. This is what I've had a lifetime of experience doing. Secondly, you got to use technologies to deal with the 40% of illegal immigrants that come with a legal visa. They don't come across our border. They come in our airports, and the exit and entrance visa system needs to be upgraded like most countries have, and you need to have more Border Patrol or ICE officials in communities to be able to identify where they are and to politely ask them to leave. We need an E-Verify system that's verifiable, but businesses shouldn't be penalized for a system that isn't complete. But a great country ought to be able to figure this out. I mean, have we lost our way so much that we now assume the new normal is healthcare.gov, that rollout? I mean, think about it. Every aspect of our life, these things happen all the time. We can apply technology to deal with this issue. We ought to take away all federal law enforcement money to sanctuary cities that are violating the law. So this is not the most complex thing we have to deal with. This is not it. This is the first step. And if you gain people's confidence that we do that, then I think we could realize that legal immigration, needs to be reformed as well. Most of our legal immigrants come through a quota system by country and by family petitioning. Most people don't know this, but it was done in the 1960s, and we have what's called chain migration. So we have the broadest definition of family in the world. Spouse and minor children, like every country, right? And then adult siblings and adult parents. If we narrowed that to what every other country has, it would be 500,000 people less that you could then imagine having 500,000 people that you picked who could come in. That would be a catalyst for higher sustained economic growth, because you'd have the entrepreneurs, the scientists, the people that are graduating with PhDs after we train them and subsidize it in some ways. Then we say, go back to your country and compete against us. That's not the kind of create a guest worker program to deal with jobs that no one else will do. These are the kinds of things that will help us grow, but we've got to first control the border, narrow family petitioning, and this country would be benefiting, as we always have, generation after generation. For the 11 million, might as well bring that one up too, right? Okay, thanks. The 11 million people, there's two things you can do. Nothing. I mean, that's a plan, I guess. Or you could say, let's deal with the 11 million people here where they earn legal status. They don't earn citizenship, they earn legal status, where they pay a fine, where they work, they have a provisional work permit, they don't receive federal government money, they learn English, they pay taxes, and over an extended period of time, they earn legal status. The option of deportation, according to the American Action Network, a conservative think tank, is $400 to $600 billion over 20 years, and it'll disrupt community life. I, for one, think the plan I just laid out is a better plan than a $400 to $600 billion cost plan or keeping people in the shadows. I, for one, believe that. And I'm going to stand on that and believe on it. And if people don't like it, that's fine.
We don't have a lot of time left, but there are a number of questions on this, and I awkwardly am going to have to ask my wife's question so I don't get in trouble at home. I'm already in trouble with Donald Trump. I can't be in trouble with my wife.
Hey, tell you what, my friend. You're on the side of women. I'll take your side of that bet.
Thank you. I appreciate
it. I mean, come on. Give me a break. I mean, do we want to win? Do we want to insult 53% of all voters? What Donald Trump said is wrong. That is not how we win elections, and worse yet, that is not how you bring people together to solve problems. That is not the way to do it. So your decision, I think, was the right one. Mr. Trump ought to apologize.
Thank you. Okay. So you and I have talked about this before. My wife is college educated. We have a daughter who's now going into 4th grade. We appreciate your dedication to education standards, but she can't help our 3rd grader with her math homework because of the Common Core material. And so I know you and I have had the conversation on Common Core, but if you could just explain for the crowd here your view on standards, whether it's Common Core or not.
Standards need to be high. That's what I believe. They need to be higher. In most states, they're so low that if students, by the time we spend more per student than any country in the world, that's where we are than Belgium and Luxembourg, I think. We spend more per student. We end up with dismal results because we've dumbed down curriculum and we have low expectations in the form of standards. And the net result is about a third of our kids, maybe 40% at best, are truly college ready and very few are career ready. The idea that you could graduate from high school and begin your journey with a job is not really relevant anymore in America because the skills required for meaningful jobs are far higher than a high school degree, and the training, career orientation of education has diminished as well. That is a huge challenge. Standards by themselves won't yield the result we need, which is a dramatically higher number of kids being college or career ready. But it's the first step. We need more school choice. I think we need to eliminate social promotion. These are all state issues, by the way, not a federal government issue. The only place the federal government can play a role in this is to say there are three big funding sources the federal government gives. If Florida, which has a learning disabled voucher program, it's called the McKay Scholarships. If anybody here have a loved one that has a learning disability, it's like 500,000 in Florida. It's a big deal. If the federal law says that if you have an IEP, an individualized education plan, if you don't think in Florida that plan's working for you, you can take the state and local dollars and go to a private school. What would happen if we took the federal monies that are supposed to go to IDEA, this program for learning disabilities, and said you could add that to the voucher? You would dramatically expand private options for parents that are trapped in failing schools. Same with Title I for kids in poverty, and same with early childhood education. States ought to be able to have the ability, if they're willing to reform, they ought to have the ability to access this money rather than having the federal government fund the beast. So I'm for higher standards with real accountability and real school choice. It ought to be state-driven, locally administered. The federal government should have nothing to do with it, because I know for a fact, I went to visit, Eric, when I ran the first time, 250 schools. I'll never forget, I'm sitting in this is 1998, and trust me, this is still the exact same problem we have today in American education. This is not, we haven't overcome this at all. I'm sitting in this lab, remedial lab. A kid is trying to pass an 8th grade level high school test in 1998. I'm running for governor. The question was, a baseball game starts at 3, it ends at 4:30, how long's the game? He couldn't answer it. Now, you think about the thousands and thousands of kids. If we dumb things down and don't expect them to do what we want them, what we believe they can do, if we keep dumbing it down, your kid's going to be great because his teacher, she's never going to let him down. But what about these? Yeah. But what about the failed public schools all across this country? We're casting aside kids. If we expect that kind of expectation and there's no consequence for kids like that, trust me, that's not a problem just for him and his family. That's a problem for all of us. And I will not allow that to happen. I will fight on behalf of kids in poverty, kids that are struggling. We should not let them cast them away, because we're going to have Fergusons and Baltimores and other things like that. And this should break our heart, but it also should give us a conscience that as Americans, we should never let this happen. That's why I'm passionate about this stuff, and that's why I'm for high standards.
Governor Bush, thank you.
Thank you.
And yet she still says she stands with Planned Parenthood. I'm proud to say in my state, a blue state, as Eric mentioned, we defunded Planned Parenthood more than 4 years ago, long before the videos, because we knew how disturbing that was. Hillary Clinton earlier this year went after me and other governors who signed into law voter ID requirements to show a photo ID. She's out of touch with the vast majority of everyday Americans, not just Republicans or conservatives, but Americans who understand that you should have a law that says it's easy to vote but hard to cheat. And that's why we have a photo ID requirement. Hillary Clinton is going to claim that she's got the upper hand when it comes to foreign policy. But think about that. Hillary Clinton, think about that. Everywhere in the world that Hillary Clinton has touched is more messed up today than before she and the president took office. Hillary Clinton should not be our commander-in-chief. And it's not just about her leadership or lack thereof at the State Department. Think about those emails she was doing while she was Secretary of State. You know, the emails where she claimed they didn't have classified information in them, and yet there was. The American people can't trust Hillary Clinton. As I said the other night, sadly, it's likely that the government in Russia and China knows more about Hillary Clinton's email server than do the members of the United States Congress, and that has put our security at risk. Hillary Clinton could be the deceiver-in-chief, but we cannot trust her to be the commander-in-chief. And there's plenty more things, and I'll touch on in a minute, but think about it then. So the question is not just who we nominate for president as the Republican side, but who's best equipped to make sure that Hillary Clinton is not the next president. And I would argue to you, there's a lot of great people. You saw many of them the other night, first on one part of this, or one stage earlier in the night, and then the others joined with me, 9 others, and there are a great group of Republicans. Some of the best we've had since 1980. In fact, you saw the other night, I'm from the Midwest, I'm Midwestern Night, I didn't spend my time talking about the other Republicans. You see, they're not our opponent, Hillary Clinton is. And sometimes people confuse that. But I want to tell you why I'm the best candidate to take on Hillary Clinton, because I realize there are people from all across this area, and so I'm going to make the risk of referencing a Homer reference for me. You see, my favorite football player is a guy who plays football in my state. He was last year the NFL's MVP. Aaron Rodgers. You see, Aaron Rodgers doesn't talk trash. He lets himself show his work on the field. Not by how he trash talks others. He shows what he does on the field to play. And I would argue to you that I'm the best candidate to take on Hillary Clinton, because I don't just talk about it. I fight and I win, and I have a record of accomplishments in a blue state, and I did not compromise my principles to get it done, unlike anybody else out there. All good people, but there are fighters who've yet to win those fights. There are winners who've yet to be in the fight. I'm the only one who has fought and won and actually got things done in a blue state, and we did it without compromising our principles. That's the kind of leader we need. That's the kind of common sense, conservative, reform-minded leadership not just our party needs, but our country needs going forward. You see, if we're going to take on a name from the past, we need a name from the future. We need a new, fresh face. If we're going to take on somebody who embodies Washington, we need someone who's not only not from Washington, someone who's taken on the big government special interests from Washington. And if we're going to take on someone who doesn't have accomplishments, we need someone who's got a full list of accomplishments, particularly in a state that hasn't gone Republican for president since 1984. So let me spend a couple more minutes, though, telling you about where we need to go and where I'd like to take this country. You know, talk about a vision for 2020. Where we'd be 4 years into a Walker presidency. And it's simple. It's about 3 simple ideas: reform, growth, and safety. Reform is about taking power from Washington and putting it into the hands of the hardworking taxpayers in states all across this great country. Growth is about helping people, not the government, helping people create a better economy so that everyone can live their piece of the American dream. And safety is about protecting your children and your grandchildren from radical Islamic terrorism and all of the threats in this world. When we talk about reform, for me, it's about not just saying you're going to take power out, but taking power and money when it comes to everything from Medicaid to transportation to infrastructure to environmental protection, yes, even education, money and power out of Washington and sending it back to our states, and in the cases of our education system, sending it right back to our schools. Because I don't believe in Common Core or statewide or a nationwide school board. Send the money and power back to the people at the local level. You know, Hillary Clinton believes, I think she believes, that you measure success in government by how many people are dependent on the government. We as Americans, not just as conservatives, we as Americans should measure success by just the opposite, by how many people are no longer dependent on the government. Because we understand that true freedom and prosperity, they don't come from the mighty hand of the government. They come from empowering people to live their own lives and control their own destinies through the dignity that's born of work. I think about my first job. I washed dishes at the Countryside restaurant. Then I moved up to the big times. I started flipping hamburgers at McDonald's. Like a lot of you don't know this, but Paul Ryan, my friend, grew up in Janesville. I was about 20 miles down the road in Delavan. We both flipped burgers at McDonald's. The only difference is Paul's manager told him he had to flip hamburgers in the back because he didn't have the interpersonal skills to work the front cash register. But I think about growing up in that small town. My dad was a small town preacher. My mom was a part-time secretary. My grandparents were farmers who didn't have indoor plumbing until my mother went off to junior high school. My dad's dad, my grandpa Walker, was a machinist for 42 years at Barbara Coleman. I look back on life from my brother and me and realize we didn't inherit fame or fortune from our families. What we got was the belief that if you work hard and you play by the rules, you can do and be anything you want. That is the American dream, and that is a dream worth fighting for in America yet today. But if more people are going to live that dream, we've got to have an economy that works for every American. And it's not working under this president. It certainly wouldn't work under Hillary Clinton. You see, Hillary Clinton thinks you grow the economy in Washington. Last year alone, 6 of the top 10 wealthiest counties in America, you know where they were? In and around Washington, D.C. For the rest of us in America, we understand that people create jobs, not the government. And we need to help people in cities and towns and villages all across this country live their piece of the American dream. And you do that in 5 simple ways. First off, you start by repealing Obamacare once and for all and put patients and families back in charge of their health care decisions. And I mean right away, I'd send a bill up on the very first day as president, just like I authorized our state to join the Obamacare lawsuit on the very first day. A lot of people talk about it. We've actually done it in my state, and we'll do it for America if you give us that chance. Secondly, we need to rein in the out-of-control federal regulations that are like a wet blanket on the nation's economy. We saw it the other day with the EPA. It cost my state alone something like 20,000 manufacturing jobs with what I call the costly power plan. We need to rein that in so that we can move the economy going forward for small businesses and farmers and ranchers and others out there. Third, we need to have an all-of-the-above energy policy that takes advantage of the abundance of what God has given us here on this country and on this continent. We are an energy-rich country. We need to start acting like it. Fourth, we need to help people get the education and skills that they need to succeed in careers that pay far more than the minimum wage. Let Hillary Clinton talk about how low wages are going to be. We're going to talk about how we lift everyone up with the education and skills that they need to succeed. I'm proud of what we did to reform public education in my state. We now have the second best ACT scores in the country. Why? Because we took power out of the hands of the big government special interests, the big government union bosses, and put it firmly in the hands of the hardworking taxpayers and the people they elect to run their schools. We got rid of seniority and tenure. We can hire and fire based on merit. We can pay based on performance. We can put the best and the brightest in our schools. We need to be able to do that all across America. And we gave more families quality choices. You know why? Because I trust parents to make the right decision for their children. And finally, in addition to those other 4 things, the last thing for a pro-growth plan going forward is we need to not only reform the tax code, but lower the tax burden, both on individuals and on employers, so that we can be competitive again in the world and bring more of those jobs back from overseas to put more of our fellow Americans back to work. Now, sometimes people joke about why I make such a focus on lowering taxes. You can see in my state, I'm proud to say, we cut taxes by $2 billion. We cut them on individual rates, we cut them on employers, we cut them on property. In fact, property taxes are lower today than they were 4 years ago. So I'm proud of what we did with tax relief, but sometimes some of the liberals say, oh, why does the governor focus so much attention on tax relief? Well, I tell people all the time, it's simple to explain. You see, my wife, Tonette and I like to go to a store, called Kohl's department store. And at that store, like a lot of great retailers, just about everything's on sale. So I've learned over the years, if you're going to go to the rack to buy a shirt that says it was $29.99, you now go to the one that says it was $19.99. And then we go out and we take the insert, the little scratch-off thing from the Sunday newspaper, and we take that up to the cash register. Or maybe if I remember to stop at home, we get the coupon that's mailed to us that gives us 15 or 20, or if we're really lucky, 30% off, right? And then as the cash register, we go up there to the clerk and she's ringing up the bill. My wife swoops into her purse and she pulls out some of that Kohl's cash, right? And next thing you know, they're paying me to buy that shirt, right? Well, it feels like it. Which I think I got this tie on sale at Kohl's as well, so I got it the other day. But I'm thinking about that, and I said, well, it feels like it. So how does a company like Kohl's make money? They make it off of volume, right? You see, they could sell shirts at that higher price, and they might sell a few, or they could lower the price, broaden the base, and make more money off of volume. That's how I think about your money, the taxpayers' money. You see, we could have a government that taxes you at a higher rate, and a few of you could afford it. Or we can lower the rate, broaden the base, and increase the volume of people participating in the economy. Years ago, that worked pretty well under a guy by the name of President Ronald Reagan. Back then, we called it the Laffer curve. Today, I call it the Kohl's curve, because I think you can spend your money far better than the federal government. Although I think when you look at the size and quality of this field, the process may last until late April and May, if not to the convention. That's a good thing. That's a good thing as long as we're talking about issues. Not nonsense, not hysteria. As long as we're talking about issues and what we have to offer that's better than what people like Hillary Clinton's going to offer, we're going to be fine. And I believe Pennsylvania can be one. I mean, think about it. Even though the governor, who's a friend of mine, the former governor, lost, Republicans in the legislature in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania actually added seats. It's why I've been there multiple times already this year. I think the upper industrial Midwest, where I live, is going to be key to electing the next president. And so I think we can win in states like Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, as well as others across the country. And we're going to make a play for each and every one of those states. I've carried areas of my state that are heavy blue-collar manufacturing areas. Why? Because people saw results. They saw that we stood up and fought for them. We froze tuition on all of our university campuses so that working families could afford to pay for their kids' college education. We cut property taxes for working families. We cut income taxes for working families. We made it easier for employers to put more working families to work. We did it in a state like Wisconsin. There's no doubt it's not too late for America.
Dr. Fallner from Penfield, Illinois asks, why should middle-class voters vote for you with trade deficits causing the loss of so many jobs? How would you reverse the trend?
On trade deficits, I think for starters, we should actually have free and open trade like we did under President Reagan, but we should have it on a level playing field. If we have a level playing field, American workers can compete with anybody in the world. Unfortunately, under this president, not just when it comes to trade, when it comes to Cuba, when it comes to Iran, when it comes to other areas, this guy's not a very good negotiator. In fact, sadly, I've said about the Iran deal, I'd love to play cards with this guy because this guy folds on just about everything. As president, we would put in place aggressive measures to make sure that we had truly free trade going forward. So again, Americans can compete on a level playing field. We can out-innovate and outwork anybody in the world if given the chance on a level playing field, and we need to. Because right now, more than 90% of the world's purchasing power is outside of the borders of the United States. And so we can't ignore the rest of the world, but we need to make sure we've got a leader in the White House who understands that and is going to fight for trade policies that level the playing field so that American workers can compete with anybody else.
Reed from Atlanta, Georgia writes, as you know, the mainstream media enjoys pointing out the fact that you did not graduate from college, and they try to make an issue out of it. What's your response to the media?
It's simple. My senior year of college, I got a job offer for the American Red Cross. A lot of my friends who were a year or two older had degrees and no job. I had a job offer and no degree. I'm pretty smart. I took the job. Now, I would add to that, like any of you who are going to hire someone to run your company, I hope people would look at the job I've done in the last few years. Because it's not just about where you went to college that matters, it's about the job you're doing right now and the job you're applying to. And I think I've done a pretty good job of turning a messed up state around and putting it on the right path.
Dave wants to know, do you think that you can do nationally what you did in Wisconsin when it comes to union opposition to your governance?
Yes.
Excellent, good answer.
I'll add, I guess, but yeah, yes, and I'll tell you why. Because what we did wasn't just about unions. It was about power. You see, the unions represented the big government special interest. And what we did was take power out of their hands and put it into the hands of the hardworking taxpayers. What we need to do now more than ever, and it's why I think we're unique in this. Again, a lot of great Republicans. But there are a lot of fighters, there are a lot of winners. There's nobody else who's gone through what we've done to take power out of the hands of the big government special interests, which Lord knows we have in Washington. And the problem in this world with this economy is not Wall Street, it's K Street, where too many of the lobbyists are sitting. We need to take power out of the hands of the elite in Washington, including some Republicans, and take it and send it back to the states and local governments and the people. I've shown more than anybody in this race that's exactly what I can do and will do going forward.
Several people have the same question, including Jerry from Black Mountain, North Carolina. What are the 3 agencies, when you get into the White House, that you wouldn't wait for congressional action to begin reforming?
Well, I was talking actually with somebody here earlier, not only agencies, but think about Obamacare. Not only would I send up legislation, draft legislation right off the bat to repeal Obamacare on the first day, I believe we're going to verify. I was talking with someone earlier, it's a great point, saying it was executive action that took out the Congress from the conditions of Obamacare. Why not start off right off the bat saying, as an added incentive to get Congress to eliminate, to vote to repeal Obamacare once and for all, why not remove the exemption to Obamacare for the members of the Congress and their staff? That would be a pretty good condition going forward. So that's just with Obamacare overall, but I look at the EPA as a good example. There are 50 states that have equivalents of the EPA. Mine's called the Department of Natural Resources. To me, long term, I'd love to take all that power and money and send it back to the states where people who actually live in those states have to live with the way they interpret those laws. But in the beginning, part of the reason why I'm in court right now with my Attorney General trying to sue the Obama administration over what I call the costly power plan, which is the rule they just put out, is because they've overstepped their bounds. And so I think you can take on the EPA in that regard. You can take on other regulations. I certainly would pull back on I would eliminate the executive action the president took on illegal immigration. Another example where the Congress didn't do it, but I and 24 other governors stood up in court and got them to at least block it. As president, I would take that out right away. Thanks, everybody. God bless you.
We've done 7 of these. This is our 7th RedState guy. I don't know if we ever taught this.